Welcome to Pandora's Awareness Podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. I am your host, Asher, and our guest today is Danielle Shea. She's joined us all the way from California, the West Coast. And Danielle, welcome to the podcast.
Asha, I'm really excited to be here. Just like our conversation a little bit off camera has been really fun and we've been laughing. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna make you laugh because we're gonna talk about failure. For the theme of today is around failure. And in Asher's world, failure is simply a new experience. But
Mm,
not everybody see it that way. But I understand that oftentimes some of our biggest breakthrough happens when we have those failure moments. You know, those mistakes we have. Some of our biggest mistakes are our biggest breakthrough, so to speak. So I'm hoping to kind of get into your story, your journey about your experience with failure. You want to share some of those stories with us. But before you do that, just let the folks know what you specialize in and some of the stuff that you being a hero to the world with.
yeah. And I am 100% subscribed to your philosophy on failure. It's just a step and it's the process that we need to get to success. So my name
Mm.
is Danielle Shea and I coach male and female sexual abuse survivors all around the world to reclaim their power so that they can live a joyful and fulfilled life by building their support system, creating healthy boundaries, and developing unwavering confidence.
That's incredible. No, well, that is good work because here we are in this place in this time in life where a lot of us really need to latch on to other people's recipe that they're using that are finding successful in their life. Because it's all about sharing your own personal journey, your own personal story about the things that has been working for you. You know, because we often taught that, hey, go to school and learn this skill. Well, life already taught you the skill. Why not use it? You know, why not share it with other people? Because oftentimes people resonate with you because of your mistakes, your failure, your journey, the things that you've experienced that they are going through currently, and would like some insight from that. So, with that said, what are some of your biggest moments of failures that you want to start with? Like, oh my God, been some of the most transformative moments for you that you want to share with folks right now?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say, agreed to everything you just said. You go get an education, blah, 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 do the things. My degree is in mechanical engineering.
Mm,
My minor is in math. I am in a whole different field now, right? Like helping people heal from sexual abuse. And that's a whole story in itself on how we got here. But like we can make mistakes and we can go and do things and you can do something that's so left field and end up in the right field somehow.
mm,
Right? Like you don't have to just follow one kind of path. And I think that we get stuck and we think that when we change our mind, we think that that's a failure too.
mm,
But you're allowed to just throw things up at the wall and see what sticks. And you're allowed to follow what feels good and follow what feels intuitive to yourself rather than like, okay, well, I have to do this because it looks good on paper, or someone else said that I had to do this, or I've sunk so much time into this thing already, like then that means I have to do it forever and ever. And that's not true. Like I went to school for 5 years to get my
mm.
bachelor's in engineering. And I went and I was an engineer and it was fine.
You got
And
a little bit of excitement. It was fine.
it was fine. But I love what I do now, right? And so I had to go and I had to go and test that thing. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, so you're not an engineer anymore. And that's what you did for school. So that's considered a failure.
Mm,
But it's just a stepping stone in another direction. And that's where life takes us. Um, but really, I think biggest thing that I have done in my life where I have like truly and actually failed is not asking people for support and assuming that I had to do everything myself. And that is kind of the impetus of this is also my second business. I had another business before this one and it failed.
mm,
It doesn't exist anymore. I closed it because I tried to do everything myself and it never took off and it never was going to because I wasn't asking people for help. And we are learning from that mistake in this business.
Wow. I think you're too wise for your age.
Thank you. That's from trauma.
But if we gotta take this another level down to figure out, why is this thing so important for you? Because I love the way you put that as far as the thing that you really specialize in now. And if I gotta take it another level down, like why is this thing so important for you that you felt like you gotta specialize in as far as doing this for other people? Why is it so important for you?
Yeah. So in college, I don't like to use the R word because it's very triggering for people. I was sexually abused.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had to go through hell to just find my way back to even like the smallest scraps of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that first abuse led to other abuse and me putting myself into dangerous situations and trying to take my own life and just putting myself into places because I didn't want to be here anymore. Like clearly I was just an object and I didn't matter in this world if that many people were willing to see me as such. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that people who've been sexual have experienced sexual violence, like it's not a one-time thing, even if it's with other people. Like these there's microaggressions, there's different types of abuse that happen. And so I had to claw my way out of that. And I never planned on telling my story, to be completely honest with you. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually promised myself that I wouldn't tell my story until there were two people in my life who like could no longer hear it anymore. And those people are no longer here. Um, and so it was just because I didn't want to break their hearts, you know? And it wasn't until I closed my first business and I was just kind of sitting there like I was back in corporate America. I don't fit in there. I don't like it there. I have a problem with authority.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just was doing some different courses, trying to think like, what do I want to do next? And I was in this speaker training course and I just got this download and we were talking about, how the universe provides earlier before we even started recording. Just got this download from the universe being like, it's time to tell your story. And I was like, ma'am, no, thank you. No,
Mm-hmm.
no, 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 no. We're not doing that. Hell no. And some other expletives. And then I just kind of sat with it and was like, this is what I have to do. This is where I have to tell my story. And so I started getting certificates in being a trauma informed coach and counseling for sexual abuse survivors and getting all of these different educations. But I love what you said before of like life has already taught you something. We all have our PhDs in life in something. And so I'm a lived experienced expert. So when I was going to therapy and getting healing for this particular abuse, and I was talking to people who hadn't been through it, like it just didn't hit as deeply. But then you start connecting with people who've actually been through this, and you're just like, okay, you have an understanding that only someone who's been through this can have. And so now that's what it's allowed me to connect with so many other people is because I've been through this. And that's why it's like so heavy on my heart. And I have the privilege to know that my voice matters. And I had the privilege in my healing to know to have people around me who supported me, and so many other people don't. And I let my privilege in that being like, oh, my story isn't important because like my abuse wasn't blah, 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 like keep me down. And that's just like another insidious lie that we tell ourselves. And I think that if I hadn't decided to tell my story for me and my healing, that would have been a failure on my part.
Wow. The price we pay to really practice our purpose.
Yeah.
And I think you're practicing your purpose right now because I'm listening and it takes a lot to really like come out and say, hey, this is what happened and now this I'm gonna own this thing.
Mm.
And then I'm gonna go out there and go up against the anti-hero against this thing. And I'm going to find a solution for the victims that were in the space that you were in. And now you get to be a hero in your own story so they can see, hey, Daniel's the hero. She made it through this. I could do the same thing too, right? And I really I see that stuff and I'm like when I'm thinking about other people's challenges there, the thing that they went through, that the thing that the universe assigned to them with a high cost, because you gotta pay for you paid a you paid a steep price for this purpose,
Yeah.
and now you gotta go wear it. And you gotta wear it with a smile, wear it with pride, wear it with joy. And it's like, hey, now I get to go be against this anti-hero now. Like I know who the enemy is, right? I know who the victims are. right? And I know my purpose now. So that's very powerful to hear.
I needed to hear that. Like that was wow. And
Mm.
they always talk about like finding your why. I have so many whys to like get me up in the morning to be able to do what I do, but also like I've never thought about it that way. So thank you for that gift. That was really nice.
You're welcome, my friend. So speaking through the lens of your own purpose now, the thing that you really specialize in, which I think is very, very, very valuable. Um, the people that you're talking to, that you're healing, that you help to kind of like find themselves again, because I know once this thing happened, like somebody steal your power. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way to get power back is to take it. Like we all know this. Like nobody gets power back. You gotta take it. And so you've taken your power back. Tell me how you did that.
Yeah, I mean, so many different things and so in such like a haphazard way as
Hmm.
well. And that's also why I do what I do is I put it in a succinct, like, okay, we're gonna do this first. Like there's a steps. We can follow the steps and we can follow this program to be able to. So you don't have to take as long as I did.
Mm.
And
How
so
how long did you take, by the way, to find yourself back?
I would say that you're kind of always are, right? Like there's the growing in life that we all do. Like I was telling you earlier, like I'm about to turn 30, so I'm going into this new decade. And that's like from 20 to 30, that's a different kind of finding yourself moment
Mm.
as well, right? From 16 to 18, that's a different finding yourself. But for people, especially those who've experienced it at such a young age,
Mhm.
um, you kind of always are. And there's never, ever, ever like, I want to go back to like the time before it happened. I want to go back to
Mhm.
that normal. And some people never had that normal because it was something that they experienced like pre-verbal. And so you kind of are always finding your way back to yourself. But I would say that my way back to myself of not hating myself and not like actively looking for ways to destroy myself was about 7 years.
Mm.
And for some people, that's a really short amount of time. I have a lot of clients who I'm the first person that they've told, and it happened decades ago.
Mm.
So they've carried this burden for so long. Um, so yeah, that active like, hey, you're pretty cool, and I like this person. I like hanging out with this person was probably about 7 years.
Mm.
So how we got so to answer your question of how kind of we got here, a lot of it was again asking for help. Like other people have walked this path, and this is true for anything, starting a business, starting a podcast, learning how to drive a car, going to school, all of the things. Someone else has already done it, and someone has the same challenges that you're experiencing right now. Like go follow their playbook. What did they do? Ask for support,
Mm.
ask for questions, ask your questions. And we don't have to do life alone. Like we really don't. And it can feel so isolating no matter what kind of trauma you've been through. And we've all experienced trauma in our lives. Um, and it doesn't have to be because like pain is something that connects us all and we can find our own humanity in that. So recognizing that you don't have to do it alone, um, getting the help that you need for the help that you need, right?
Mm.
Like I tell people you go to the gym, right? You need a coach, you need a trainer, you need a nutritionist. So
Mm.
get someone who can like get a therapist and get a healing coach or, get someone who's going to help you with this specific thing in your life, who's been there, who's done that, and who now is on the other side, because then they can hold your hand and walk you through that path. Um, and then a lot of it was just like coming back to your body, especially sexual trauma. It's an immediate disconnect from your physical being. And you're like, I don't live there anymore. Like, I don't like what's going on here. And so coming and finding your way back to that. So take your hot girl walk, like go outside, men,
Mm.
women, take your hot girl walk. Um, you know, the first thing I tell my clients, eat, sleep, breathe, walk. If we can get those four things down and we can really build a solid foundation, everything else is going to feel a lot easier. But if you're not sleeping, if you're not eating, if you feel like you're constantly constricted and you can't take a deep breath, and if you're not getting yourself outside in nature, like the rest of the stuff is going to feel so hard. And
Wow.
healing can be that simple. We can take it down bare bones and it can be, did I eat enough? Did I sleep enough? Am I actually actively intentionally breathing? And did I go for a walk today? And then just keep keep doing that.
I can only imagine what that was like for you based on your language. And it's, it's something that I put pen to paper on is about like the express way through failure is is community support.
Mm.
And I'm hearing you channeling the same thing right now. It's like ask for help, ask for help. And sometimes we don't understand how much that is. But another people will ask for help. Like it is, I feel like it is one of the hardest things for people to do because even myself sometimes it's like, man, when are you gonna ask for help, Asher? Because sometimes I get trapped in that space where I want to learn something. I just want to learn, I want to learn. But sometimes different things like, when it comes to certain, like me personally, when it comes to certain things, I always think about the who. Like, who's gonna help me do this thing? Like, who's been doing this thing longer than I have
Yeah.
before about the how. But some stuff I just naturally want to learn it. So I kind of focus on how can I learn this thing. But you're right about the community support, the people that support you. That's the fastest way through any situation that you feel like you're failing that you're struggling with. Is support system support, and a lot of people have that because they are isolate themselves. They like to be alone. Because when that stuff happened to you, based on your explanation right now, you want to hide away. You want to go someplace where nobody can find you, and
Yeah.
in that space, that lock yourself away from the world. It's really, really that place where you really, really like need people but you're not reaching out. And how did somebody find you or did you find somebody? How did that work for you?
Um, a little bit of both. Like there's definitely this huge period of just self-isolation. And I am so privileged to have a very, very good relationship with my mom,
Mm,
who's also a trauma nurse. And
mm,
so she is very aware of when things change and like what's going on. And so she knows, certain signs to kind of look for. Um, and so when I was away at school and it happened, and because I have a good relationship with her, she could just tell that I had shifted in some way, even though I wasn't able to verbally communicate like what had happened because I didn't believe. First of all, I thought it was my fault. And so
mm,
because it was my fault, I'm a failure. I'm a piece of poop.
mm,
I I, you know, I'm the problem. And and so there was a lot of shame in that. Um, and it was really her and then like other people piecing together my story for me.
mm,
Someone else had to tell me, Danielle, what you're explaining to me was not consensual. And I was like, really? Huh. Okay. Like, and then other people piecing together, like, so what actually happened at that party and like what and just putting things together and I had to have multiple people tell me what happened to me because I was in such disbelief that anyone could do that to anyone. Um, and then in such disbelief that like it happened to me. And I pushed away help for so long and it wasn't any kind of one moment. Like there was no crying on the bathroom floor moment because crying on the bathroom floor was just like every moment of my life. It was like we were at rock bottom for so long. There
mm,
wasn't like a pivotal like, oh, this is happening. But finally, my mom like lovingly threatened me. She was like, I'm either going to drag you in somewhere myself so you can get help, or you need to go ask for help right now because I'm not letting you suffer like this any longer. And it was that moment of like harsh love because I know that, again, my particular relationship with my mother is a very good one.
mm,
And so I'm not saying that like this is something to subscribe to everybody. And I knew that she was doing that out of love. Like she was like, either I'm taking this into my own hands now, or I'm recognizing that you are an adult and also you need to go get help. And so that's where that journey started. And I went to my college counselor and they looked at me and went, we can't help you. You need more help. Here are
mm.
some other resources. And I was like, cool, I'm crazy. Awesome. And then got help and support and therapy. And then I had the most kick-ass therapist, and she was able to just put things in front of me, allow me to pick them up and put on what felt good. And sometimes I love my mom. Again, she's the best person ever. And also, she's my mom, so I'm not going to listen to her at 19.
Hmm.
But an unbiased person, I'm like, oh, you must be right because you don't know me and you don't have to love me. And so, therefore, I'm going to believe more of what you say, which is why getting support from a whole plethora of people is really the way to go because you might listen to like you might hear something Asher says and be like, "Oh, yeah." And then like your partner is like, "Dude, I've been saying that for weeks now, you know?"
It's interesting how like the tone that we actually listen to
Mm,
when we're in a situation where we are like drowning. And I realize how important it's like sometimes it's the voice, like the tone of the voice makes a difference. Like you would think like, oh, it's the tone of the voice. Like it's like a music.
hmm
It's like a frequency in the music, right? And that thing that's gonna stop you, gonna get you out of your space is a tone. Same words but different tone. And once you hear like, oh,
And there's science to back this up. So yes.
yeah. So it's interesting. So every time, so sometimes I do listen to a lot of audiobooks too, right? And sometimes I'm listening to, the same thing over and over from other people. But when somebody has said, I'm like, it just, I hear it now. Like I just heard that. But you know what I'm saying? But he read it before he said, but you just, when somebody said it with a certain tone, it's like, I heard that rhythm just now.
Mm.
I feel it. And it happens with a lot of things. So sometimes you gotta hear the message over and over from other people until that tone, the right tone hit you when the right frequency hit you at the time that you need to hear it. And you come alive and you're like, wow, now I get what's going on. What
One
was
million
that
percent.
what was that tone like for you when you hear it? What was that feeling like?
It didn't feel good at the time,
Mm,
especially through that healing. Like sometimes you hear something for the first time and you're
mm-hmm,
like, "Oh, I have the solution." And you like go to work really fast on something. That happens a lot in my business. I like get an inspiration. I'm like, "Oh, this is the thing that the people need to hear," or this is the thing that's gonna the marketing message needs to be changed, or the coaching message. But like when you're going through that kind of healing, like it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like, oh, this is the thing that's gonna change my life. It just felt like,
mm,
fine. Like okay, you're right. Like I can't keep doing what I'm doing any longer, and I don't know what else to do, and I give up. It was very much like a whatever. And
mm.
then it was a lot of like whatevers until whatever became, oh, but I'm not gonna do anything with that. Oh. And then like, oh, and then, it was just a lot of like taking the smallest steps that were so painful to take until they became, we're just walking now. And I think that we often forget that like our failures teach us the most, but those things never feel good. And like that's okay. And anyone who's telling you their transformation story, they're telling it from their perspective of looking back at that
Mm-hmm.
person who was there and going, I have grace and I have empathy and I have love for that version of myself. But the person who was over here going through that, like they didn't like what was going on, like that version.
You made me think about something now. Maybe we can switch gear into this because you're telling a story, and oftentimes you're telling a story at some point in the story, not like at the end of it or at the beginning of it. You're some point in it, but you're always telling the story from what happened. So you're telling your story right now. I'm not sure where you are in your journey right now, like, but the point you're at right now, telling the story, looking back in hindsight, right, with all that insight you got from just experiencing that thing. If we gotta step into foresight, and people gotta follow you on that journey, what's into foresight, and people looking at their current situation and what's in plain sight for them that they're experiencing. If you gotta give the foresight piece of it now, looking back, knowing what you went through, how will you paint that picture for people going forward that needs to see, hey, what could be possible ahead for their story?
There's so much hope. There's so much hope. And my whole entire premise of my business is like painting that picture of hope and living a joyful and fulfilled life, transitioning from survivor to thriver. And in order to do that, you have to be a striver. You have
Mhm.
to be someone who can look at the future and go, it's gonna be better. And whether that's coming from a place or like of like it has to be better or like desperation, like please let this be better. Just knowing that there is going to be a better at some point. And then you're gonna surpass that better. And
Mhm.
you're gonna surpass that and surpass that and surpass that. I was journaling yesterday and I'm writing down all my goals. And I was like, you know what? I don't spend enough time celebrating. And I do this with my clients all the time. If I was one of my clients, I'd be flicking myself in the head because I don't like, we all don't celebrate where we've come from. So we forget like all of the steps that we took. And so I was like listing all of the things that I had already done. And Danielle, like in her deep pits of despair, like could not even fathom the life that current Danielle is living. And Danielle at 35 and 45 and 55, like, is not going to be able to fathom, like, this version of myself cannot fathom what that's going to look like.
Mhm.
And so when we experience anything hard in life, I think we tell ourselves, like, play small. Even if we're not telling ourselves that, that's the actions that we're taking. And so the picture, so one of the first things I do with my clients is let's paint that picture. Like, what does it want to look like? So for some of them, it's I want to be a better dad and I want to show up and be present and focused at my kids' soccer games. Like, okay, great. So that means we need to be present and focused with yourself right now. For other people, it's I want to be able to tell my story and I want to be an advocate and I want to go on stages and talk about this and show people that they can heal as well. And so then it's like, okay, well, what's the step that we can take right now? And that's such a personalized thing, like what you want your life to look like. And it doesn't have to look like what's on social media. It doesn't have to look like what your parents had or your siblings or whatever. It's what means joyful and fulfilled to you. Like define those words first and then decide what are the pieces that fit in to make that joyful and fulfilled life happen. And for so many people going through a trauma that is so disconnected from yourself, you don't trust your answers, but you also like don't even know how to get there in the first place. And so it first starts with dreaming, like just write down what are like if you could just journal for 10 minutes straight on like what does your ideal life look like? No editing, just do it, do it, do it. Then rip that piece of paper out, do it again, bigger and better, and then go, okay, what do I need to do to get here? And then just start reverse engineering that kind of process to how you need to get there. So if it's like, okay, you want to buy a house, but you're deeply in debt, then cool, put the house up on your vision board, look at it, and then make a get out of debt plan. Like if that's step one, right? And so there's thing, but just keep your eye on that prize and continue to look for hope, look for hope, look for hope.
You triggered some thoughts for me just now. And when you was talking, I was thinking, sometimes people hear, like we talk about that tone,
Mm-hmm.
like what you're saying right now, it's not no, what you call it, no PhD process.
Yeah,
It's simple. But
super.
the thing about simple is not a lot of people do simple. Because when you're in a place where your mental space is disrupted in a place where you're disempowered, you don't feel like a future value to anybody, so forth and so on. Simple things like that doesn't seem like the solution. You think it's something very complex, very, very complex, but it's not. But then how do you feel? How do you get people like, hey man, no, I'm talking to people like if you listen to this right now, you're probably thinking like, oh yeah, that sounds very serious, write stuff down. But I'm gonna share from my personal experience. And I started my writing journey like back in 2021. I started just after I retired from the military, I just start like looking back at my own story, my own history, because I realized that all the things I've accomplished, accumulated, the things I've experienced has some kind of value. It's just that I was putting that depreciation calculator on it, and I was reducing the value of it versus increasing the value of it by looking back at it like, okay, I've experienced that thing at a very fast pace. I was doing, going very fast. I wasn't taking time to really look at this thing and really put it together. So I've accumulated all these experiences, but then I wasn't valuing it. Now I gotta look back and how do I value? I gotta start writing it down. So once I started writing it down, I'm like, wait a minute. When I take it out of my head, out of my heart, and organize the words to it, now it's starting to make a lot of sense. And when somebody's going through that stuff, if you start writing it down, because in your head it's not gonna make a lot of sense, because we already know up there the thoughts is gonna run around. But when you put it on paper, then you get to organize it, rearrange it, sequence it, so forth and so on. Then the things start to make sense. And based on that laid out vision for you for yourself, then you can look at it. Okay, these are my obstacles. These are my opposition now. Okay, now what are these things? Oh well, I really want to have this transformation in my life. So you can focus on that piece, and then it automatically see. Okay, these are the action I need to take. But you start doing that stuff, it start to make sense. But the write down stuff, people don't really see the power in it, but there's a lot of power in it. Take it out of your head, put it on paper.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing that that's what you trigger for me. You
Yeah.
shaking your head. What's going on there?
No, I mean, everything you said is so important. And like, just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy.
Mm,
Simple and easy are not the same word and they do not mean the same thing. And writing something down sounds really simple, but making yourself do it
mm,
feels terrifying because journaling is a self-awareness action. And what if you find out things you don't like? But if you keep that inside, whether it's in your head or your heart or somewhere in your body, because your body is storing your trauma, whether you like it or not, and your whatever you've been through is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal. And doing simple things, eating, sleeping, walking, breathing, adding journaling to that list, like that is
mm,
sprinkle some fairy dust on that. Like journaling, wow. And exactly what Asher just said, getting it out of your head. Because sometimes when you get it out of your head, you have a different perspective and you're like, wow. Like have you ever procrastinated on a task
mm,
that you thought was going to be so hard and then you did it and it only took like 2 minutes? But it took up so much mental space. Think
mm,
of journaling like that. Like just that feeling of getting rid of all of that mental space to be able to breathe and actually process it. And then you can go back and like Asher said, like he was able to recognize all of the things that he accomplished and take off that devalued calculator and go, no, this is that life experience was worth. And this is why it's important for me to show up and have his Pandora's awareness, right?
mm,
Getting all of these amazing people on here to just like open up a little bit. And if he kept playing small, like you wouldn't be listening to this right now.
mm,
And he's just another person, and I'm just another person. Like we're all just people. No one is better or worse than anyone else. We're all equal. So, but letting go of that is hard.
mm.
But journaling and just simple, simple steps, like your healing and whatever it is, does not have to be complicated.
Let me ask you a question. Who were some of your heroes on this journey of shaping people lives from all of this weight, burden that they're carrying? Who are some of your heroes that are doing it?
Yeah. My mom for sure. I mean, she's just been like such a rock in my whole life. I'm an only child raised by a single mom, and she made really, really difficult life choices for me to have the life that I have today, and the childhood that I had. And so, I'm so grateful for all of that privilege to get me to this point. Um, there's other people in my life who have experienced this type of trauma, and they're my heroes just because even if they haven't healed from it, it's like they are part of the reason why I do this work because like no one should have to suffer in silence. No one should have to suffer, period, but no one should have to suffer in silence and not have their voice heard and not be believed. My very first therapist, I was so lucky. Like Like they literally gave me a list and I just picked the first one who had an appointment, and she was stellar. And a lot of people don't have that privilege to have someone who just like gets you right out the gate. Because therapy can be very re-traumatizing for a lot of people, which is again why I do what I do, and I'm a healing coach and not a therapist. And I do things very differently. But like she was one of those people who you're just like, how did you even do life?
Mm.
Like just in awe of the way she carried herself, all of the things that she had accomplished. And she was so nonchalant about it. Just like, yeah, of course. Like, why wouldn't I be able to do this? I was like,
Mm.
what? What? And I listen to a lot of like personal development, self-help, things like that. So there has been so many people that didn't have no idea that I exist that have helped me through this. Like Gary Vaynerchuk was the person I was listening to when I started my first business, and like helped me have the audacity to quit my first big girl job out of school. There are people at that big girl job who were looking out for me. And there's been there's just been so many people who are just like everyday people that are in my life that have been able to like help me transform. I had a project manager um who, when I experienced sexual harassment at work, I went to him and I was like, I have to go home. Like I can't even function right now. And he was like, go home. Like he said all the right things, did all the right things. And like he taught me so much, and just like I can change my mind whenever I want. Like I do have a voice, my voice matters, and other people are going to believe me even if I don't think that that's going to happen. And it's not my responsibility to make them believe me. It's just my responsibility to get me safe. And just like being allowed to have those safe spaces. Um so yeah, I think when we ask about heroes, we think about like kind of one person in particular, and there hasn't been. It's just been all of these like regular people um who've just been there at the right time for me in my life. And then I've been able to recognize the fact that they are there and utilize their support.
Wow. And again, you got some thoughts triggering for me over here too. So when you was talking, I'm curious because I recognize something that happens to people that when you have an experience, automatically your senses become aware, like your senses are awakened. You're aware of those things now. And being through what you've been through automatically puts you in a place where you're very sensitive to it. You can notice, you can recognize it, you can recognize the symptoms of it in other people. All these things that are very, you become acute to it. So now being through what you've been through, how quickly do you notice certain some of these things in other people that you can like, oh, I know that person probably have some kind of experience like I do. Like, oh, you recognize those signs now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you recognize the things. Like I can almost recognize something instantaneously when it's like, we're not safe here.
Mm-hmm.
Abort mission. Like this is no, we're not. This is not the thing. Um, and then there's like you said, like other people where you just kind of like connect in some way. You're not really quite sure why,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's why building rapport with people is so important. And like finding that connection, and just like we have something in common for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And you just kind of, develop that. And for certain people, it takes longer for them to want to say something and open up. One of the first things I always tell people is that we always find each other. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's just something about life that connects you with the people who've been through your own experiences. Um, And then there's other things that are like something, so like a very kind of obvious sign for me. I've also experienced like a lot of addiction and just addicts in my life. And um for me, it's like if there's like a very clear sign, it's like the eyes. Like I don't, there's something about that just like intimate knowledge that I have with addiction that when I look into someone's eyes, I'm like, oh baby, like let me give you a hug. Like you're struggling, you're suffering. Like what can we do to support you? And and like show them how to kind of not show them how to walk that path, but show them that there is someone here who believes and supports them and like understands what they're going through. Um, I think that survivors of sexual abuse, they're very good at hiding their signs because they've had to do that and they've had to use that as a way to protect themselves, especially people who've experienced domestic violence. And so that they're often much harder to recognize.
Mm.
Um, but they're there in the way that people speak, in someone's body language. Like, are their feet pointing away from you? You know, are they more closed off when they're talking to you? And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you, but it might have something to do with them and their experiences. Um, but again, I would say in summary, it's very subtle.
Wow. Here's a crazy question for you before we close out. What is that? What is that one or two thing that when people do it just drive you crazy if you don't mind sharing?
That drives me crazy, like in
Hmm.
general in life.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, I only get two.
Well, we got time. We got time for a few. Go ahead.
Um, I think this question is very revealing because usually the things that we don't like about other people are things that we do ourselves, right? Um,
No, hold on. We're gonna stop right there because I don't think people understand how smart you are or wise you are when you just say that. Because a lot of people, I ask this question, only a few people kind of pick up on what I'm getting at. So oftentimes when I ask this question and people are like, okay, the answer often happens is the thing that you're guilty of is the thing that drive you crazy in other people after you overcome it. Right?
yeah,
So it is then you go like, oh man, when people do this drive me crazy because I used to do it too.
yeah.
Right? It was something that I was like, oh no, I'm like, nobody got to do this thing because, right? Whatever it is. So that was because that's my underlying piece of this question. When I asked the question, I'm like, okay, let's see where you like, okay. You're being honest. Okay. So go ahead and answer the question.
So I'll say one thing that I'm currently struggling with that is
Mhm.
annoying me so much is when other people just like don't don't take the time to sit and listen and have support and have empathy. And I myself can be quite the bulldozer of like, I have a solution, like let me do it. Um, I've been through it, I got it, I have the manual, it's right here, like let's do it. Um, and I don't like it when people do that to me because it's like, hey, I don't need a solution right now, like I just need you to listen. Um, and I'm very good about it with my clients, but
Mhm.
it's in, and so it's easier to hide, right? Because I'm like, well, I do this for a living
Mhm.
and I'm awesome. But then I look at like my friends in our relationships, and sometimes I'll like leave a discussion with my friend and I'm like, well, their problems are all solved. And I'm like, Danielle, that was your ego talking. Oh my gosh, you did the thing.
Mhm.
Listen, allow them to just like you're allowed to just have them talk, and no one needs you to come to their rescue.
Mhm.
And I know that. And that's like one of the things that I teach my clients. It's one of the things that I like put my flag in for my business of like, you're your own hero. I'm just here to hold the flashlight
Mhm.
and walk side by side with you through the dark till, because I know where the tunnel is. Like, I know where the tunnel leads. But if you need to veer right for a second, okay, like let's do that. But with my friends, I'm like, nope, we don't have time for this. We got things to do. We're moving. Um, so yeah, just that empathy and that impetus to try to have a solution, because sometimes there just doesn't need to be. It just, you just need to sit, and you just need to sit with it and allow people to sit with it.
Mhm. Okay, I know you got some more, but before you share more of so my answer to that question too, because I realized something I'll keep asking other people too. Because I hate it when people like I'm having a conversation and somebody cut me off. Like they're just jumping to let me finish my thought. That should drive me crazy. I'm like, wait a minute. Like you're gonna say something. You didn't even let me finish what I'm saying. So you don't know what I'm getting at, where I'm going. You don't. So, but I used to do it. I used to like always like right there, yeah, right, cut that off, right. I got something to say. Give me the mic, damn it, right. But then I realized, oh my God, let me stop doing that. So after I got past that, I'm like, okay, I should become a really good listener now. I'm like, okay, man, that was me. So when people do it, drives me crazy because I used to drive people crazy when I used to do it too. I'm like, oh my God, I can see what I used to do back then when I used to do that stuff. So I know I asked the same question. I'm like, okay, what is the other few things that people do that drive you crazy? What else? Right? So,
Yeah. I mean, that's one of them. I used to interrupt people all the time. And I think the thing that's super funny is like when I'm like, there's like two other people and
mm,
they're having a conversation, you're just kind of like observing it. I think that's when you're just like, I want to fix
mm,
this or whatever. Um, one of the things that bothers me as well is like uh, when people assume,
mm,
like when people assume what you're gonna say or what you're gonna do, um, and then they don't like ask for clarification because they're like, yeah, got it, check. Onward. Um, and I've gotten a lot better at asking more questions. Like, okay, let's sit with that. Like, what does that mean? Can you explain that to me? Or like, this is what I'm hearing now.
mm-hmm,
And so when other people don't take the time to just kind of pause and get that clarification, I'm like, we could have just we wasted so much time. You could have just asked one question and it would have been okay. But instead we did all these things. Um, yeah. One thing that bothers me, um, not even in conversation, is when people are just like crazy drivers.
mm,
I was never a crazy driver, but there is this kind of notion of when you're in a car, it's just cars out there, like there aren't actually people in those vehicles, and we kind of treat it like a game or something. Like they're actual human living people like in those cars and in those vehicles. I think sometimes we get so like cocooned in just ourselves, whether we want to be there or not. And we kind of forget like other people are also experiencing this world. And I find that I'm super frustrated with bad drivers when bad, right? Good, bad, they're just labels. Um, when I'm not recognizing other people's humanity or even my own humanity. It's just like we're just robots and we're just doing things. And like I didn't take time to eat, sleep, walk, breathe, um, and do those things. And so when we kind of just assume that other people aren't going through life too, and I think we all experience that, like especially as teenagers, we're just like, it's my world. But then you grow out of that and you're like, oh, we're all just humans and we're all literally doing our best. No one gave us a manual. We're all trying to figure it out. We're all just trying to do our best.
mm. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for giving me your story and the folks that are listening to you right now. I love the thing. I think I heard from Dan Sullivan, one of the guy that kind of said this, but he was talking about like you stepping into your 30s. But he said something that said the person that shows up to your 40th birthday is your fault. But he was saying prior to that, right? Like you can blame the school system, you can blame your family, you can blame your friends, you can blame the government, so forth and so on, all that stuff in those first couple of decades of your life. But whoever showed up to your 40th birthday is your fault. So on your journey into into this decade, going into the decade of your get to your 40, you're gonna learn a lot of stuff about yourself because I learned a lot about myself during my 40s. It was such an amazing time to really study me. And a lot of time you really do a lot of self-development a lot more in that state because like wow. And then when you get to 40s, you can't blame nobody. Like the guy that showed up to 40s, he's like you created that person. You can't blame nobody else for it. So speaking of that, going into your 40s now, my friend, at least finish up your 30, going into your 40s. What are some of your biggest giveaways or takeaway from the conversation that you want to tie into that?
I just want to kind of compliment you for a
Mm,
moment, if that's okay. And just the amount of listening and the connection that I feel like happened during this conversation. Like there was, like the questions were just so intentional
mm,
and so purposeful. And that is also what I'm looking for in my relationships, in my partnerships, in my business endeavors. Is just like people who show up with intentionality and integrity and fully themselves and are not afraid to be fully themselves. and just embracing that beauty in life of that, like we can all support each other and show up as ourselves and be accepted that way as well. Even if, like, I'm sure there's things that we disagree on,
Mhm.
but like that also doesn't hold as much weight because like there is that connection, there is that like intentionality and like you just showing up as you.
Mhm.
And so thank you for that. And also that is really the kind of purpose and intentionality in like my personal life of what I'm looking for and how I want to show up as well.
Thank you so much for saying that. That means a lot.
Of course.
And you were doing it, my friend. You're doing it a lot, by the way. You're very wise. I'm just let everybody know, like I'm reading you. You're wise beyond your years, my friend. And
Thank
I'm gonna leave you with these two quotes. Well, it's kind of a combination of words, but because I'm learning how to do it myself. And it says you gotta you gotta walk with kings, but you have to also connect with the common man, right? And same thing, you have to think like a wise man, yet speak like a common man.
you.
And I had to learn those things in my life because I realized that, sometimes I read a lot of books, listen to a lot of books, but sometimes my language gets so high level. And then people are like, okay, actually, I don't get it. You got to bring it down to the common man level. And I can feel that in you when you're having your conversation, that you can think deeply, you can go there, but then you can speak the language of the common person to connect with the people. And I felt the connection just having a conversation with you. So I'm like, okay, you're wise beyond your years, my friend. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that like is such a compliment to me as well, like that you don't even know. So like really and truly, thank you so much for that.
All right, folks. Well, if you're catching this on live, go ahead and put hashtag live in the chat in the comment section so we can know that you've been watching us. If you're catching this on replay, go ahead and put hashtag replay in the chat. And you've been listening to the Pandora's Awareness podcast, a place where we collect stories and circulate life-changing wisdom. And today you got wisdom from Danielle. And she's on this journey of really empowering women and men, like she said, to really come out of that dark place and start seeing the light again. So continue your journey, my friend. And with that, make it an awesome day.